Did you know that we had 15 defenses in Week 12 fantasy football put up 10 or more points? That's outrageous. And that just shows the importance of fantasy football defenses each and every week, especially right now as we are fighting for playoff seeding right now. And I do this every single week. So today we are going through the top 12 defense rankings in Week 13 fantasy football, guys. And I am one of the only fantasy football YouTubers who covers defense on a weekly basis during the season. So please go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Let's go ahead and just dive right into these rankings right now. They continue to be in their own tier. It shouldn't come as a shock. And honestly, they're almost a little bit matchup proof. And it's the Dallas Cowboys. They're taking on the Seattle Seahawks in Dallas on Thursday night. Now, I hesitate just a little bit to call them matchup proof just because we haven't seen them play an elite offense since Philadelphia. And they weren't exactly elite in that week. So Dallas is no doubt an elite defense. Like, they just smoked the Washington Commanders on Thanksgiving. And I envision them doing maybe pretty similar against the Seattle Seahawks this week. Seattle Seahawks are run by an offense that is led by a quarterback who is just not very good. I mean, Geno Smith is nothing impressive whatsoever. And those numbers you see on the screen, you just do not see fantasy defenses putting up that type of performance, guys. 13.2 fantasy points per game. That's on the level of guys like Brandon Ayuk, Tank Dell right now. That is crazy, the production that Dallas's defense is giving in fantasy football, and I just don't think it slows down this week. Number 2, I've got the Los Angeles Chargers this week taking on the New England Patriots in New England. This is one of the only weeks that I can envision having the Chargers defense inside of my top 12. And it's not and I always say this, it's not because they lack talent. They have talent. They've got Bosa, who's injured right now, but when he's healthy, very good player. Derwin James, Khalil Mack having a great season. They've got all kinds of players. Their coaching is not good. Now, with that said, last week, I provided them as my bonus defense pickup for this week. And at the end of every single defense video, I give you a bonus defense for the next week if you can put them on your roster. So make sure to stay to the end for that. But Los Angeles was last week's. And it's for very good reason. They're taking on the Patriots. So even if it's Washington's defense, like several weeks ago, I'll play a team that's playing the New England Patriots because not only can they not score points, but they stink because they're turning the ball over a ton. They turn the ball over, and that's the ultimate problem here, and that's ultimately why the Chargers defense is great option in Week 13. Indianapolis Colts defense at number 3, taking on the Tennessee Titans in Tennessee this week. Now, the Indianapolis Colts are finally living up to the expectations I had for them. Past 3 games, over double-digit performances. They've done extremely well. And you can see their numbers on the screen, they don't lie. 8.5 fantasy points per game. Over 3 sacks per game. Over an interception per game. A forced fumble per game. This defense gets after your quarterback, and they cause havoc. Through interceptions, through forced fumbles. This is a legit defense. And they're taking on this week, in my opinion, what seems to be one of the best matchups. Now, I want to caution everybody listening to this. I did have the Chiefs defense against the Raiders last week. And that was in Las Vegas. And I said on Monday night, I should have seen this one coming because it's a divisional performance. Divisional games are always questionable, and you never know what's going to happen. So there has to be a window of doubt. But with that said, the Tennessee Titans offense does not have half the talent that the Vegas Raiders offense does. Colts here at number 3. The Falcons defense, I can't believe they're back, but they're taking on the New York Jets this week. It's almost a similar situation in New England, where it's like the Jets offense actually has talent. Unlike the New England Patriots, the Jets offense does have talent. They've got Garrett Wilson. They've got Breece Hall. Their offensive line sucks, and when they get down in a hole to a good offense, they're trying to climb out of it. They're taking chances and then turning the ball over. Now, the Falcons defense has had some pretty decent performances. What I would caution you, they got a defensive touchdown last week. They still didn't put up 10 points. They're not a very good defense. The matchup is good. That's what separates the Falcons defense this week for me. Number 5 is the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they're taking on the Arizona Cardinals in Pittsburgh this week. Now, I say it every week with Pittsburgh. I know I sound like a broken record, but they're just a they're a turnover happy, sack your quarterback defense that is averaging 9.5 fantasy points a game as a result. Now, if Myles Garrett was not having such a great year and he didn't already win the defensive MVP, or I'm sorry, if TJ hadn't won the defensive MVP already, TJ Watt would be getting the defensive player of the year again. TJ Watt has been outstanding. He's sharing the sack leader, 13.5 sacks this year, with Danielle Hunter. TJ Watt is a force to be reckoned with. They might get Minka Fitzpatrick back this week. Cam Hayward's still making an impact. Alex Highsmith. There's a lot of levels to this defense. Everybody's getting a turnover. The Pittsburgh Steelers defense, I think, is going to do good things against the Arizona Cardinals offense, who just went dormant in Week 12 against the Los Angeles Rams, of all teams. Again, divisional matchup. I'm just saying Arizona's got to travel across the country to come play Pittsburgh. It's not a recipe for success for Arizona's offense, but it is one for Pittsburgh's defense. The Miami Dolphins here at number 6. And Miami this week is taking on the Washington Commanders in Washington. Not only do I love this from an offensive perspective when it comes to Miami's defense, I love it because I think Tyreek's going to put up points. I think Waddle's going to put up points. I think Raheem Mostert's going to put up points. But I love it for their defense too. Now, here's the thing. Their defense actually would be higher on this list if their number 1 pass rusher, really the only one that matters, didn't just tear his Achilles. Jalen Phillips just went down with a torn Achilles. And if you don't think that affects this defense, it definitely does. It certainly does. Miami Dolphins will not be averaging 3.5 sacks per game in the next couple of weeks. It's just not going to happen here. They get another strong matchup. That's why they're here. But I caution my viewers, don't go too overboard on the Dolphins defense just based on recent performances. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week, they're taking on the Carolina Panthers. The matchup speaks for itself. The numbers certainly don't speak for them. Like, it's not that they're the worst defense in fantasy, but 7.3 fantasy points per game, that's not good enough. They're not even averaging a turnover per game. Like, it's just not that great for Tampa Bay's defense this year. But you know what is great? The freaking matchup. The matchup is great. And again, the reason they're not higher is because when you look at the other coaches who have gotten fired this year, Josh McDaniels, Matt Canada, the offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh, both of those teams had explosive, energetic offensive performances the following week. Now Frank Reich is gone, who is widely liked in the league. I'm wondering if we see a more energetic performance from the Panthers this week. With that said, their talent is still not there, so I don't think it's going to matter ultimately that much. That's why Tampa Bay is the number 7. The Jacksonville Jaguars here at number 8. And the Jacksonville Jaguars are taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, if it was Joe Burrow, you know that Jacksonville would not be on this list. But it is not Joe Burrow, and that is not the world we live in today. Jacksonville gets a break here without having to play Joe Burrow, and they get Jake Browning. Jake Browning, who barely moved the ball against the Steelers last week. And arguably, Jacksonville's got a better defense in some areas than Pittsburgh's does. Jacksonville just doesn't get after your quarterback quite as much, and they don't get as many turnovers. But against the Cincinnati Bengals this week, I can't envision a world where Jacksonville is not a top 10 defense, and that's why they're here at number 8. The Kansas City Chiefs defense. Yes, they are still here, and they're taking on the Packers this week in Green Bay. Now, if we were discussing this matchup in September or early October, we would all be in agreement that this is a great matchup for Kansas City. It doesn't matter if it's at Kansas City and Arrowhead. It doesn't matter if it's in Lambeau Field. But based on the way that Jordan Love has been playing over the past 3 to 4 games, it's definitely an argument we can have. Now, I ultimately believe, as I said on Monday night in my live stream, that the Kansas City Chiefs defense, that game was simply, you could chalk it up to a divisional matchup. I don't think very highly or lowly of that game because of the fact that it was in division, it was in Las Vegas, and they always put up a fight against Kansas City. I don't see the same thing here for Jordan Love. I think he gets a reality check here by the Kansas City Chiefs defense, and honestly, they can finish a lot higher than number 9 this week. The Cleveland Browns defense this week, they're also going to stay in, taking on the Los Angeles Rams in Los Angeles. So obviously, when you see that kind of performance that the Rams just put up in Week 12, you're like, why? Why is the Browns defense on here? Well, obviously, when you see the numbers on the screen, and if you've been watching the channel for the whole year and seeing what the Browns defense has been doing, it doesn't come as much of a shock that they're inside the top 10. At the very least, in the top 12. Because they're averaging 3 sacks a game. They have 9.6 fantasy points per game. This defense doesn't allow you to do much. And here's the thing. The Rams, yes, they scored a lot of points last week. But you know what else happened? The Arizona Cardinals don't have a pass rush. And the Los Angeles Rams' weakness is their offensive line. The Cleveland Browns can get after the quarterback. With that said, Myles Garrett, his status up in the air right now. So there's potential doubts here about Myles Garrett. We will have to see, but either way, Cleveland Browns defense in the top 10. The New York Jets defense taking on the Atlanta Falcons. It's hard with the Jets defense, man, because they are so talented on every level of this unit. Defensive line, linebacking crew, secondary, they're all talented. Their offense gives them no hope. But put it to you this way. Like, the fact that they're averaging 8.5 fantasy points per game with that offense shows you how dominant this team is. And this is a matchup where we may not see Atlanta put up that many points. And if that's the case, the Jets defense is going to make some things happen. They absolutely will. They make things happen every week anyways. So if you can get it to be a tight 13-16 game here, the Jets defense is going to make some noise. And I think that the Jets defense can do that versus the Atlanta Falcons. The San Francisco 49ers defense taking on the Philadelphia Eagles this week in Philadelphia. Yeah, what are they doing here? Let me tell you why. So, first of all, the Philadelphia Eagles, they've got no issues offensively other than the fact that they are sometimes a little bit turnover prone. They fumble the ball. Sometimes Hurts throws some interceptions. Now, he's played cleaner football over the past several weeks. But when I think about what Philadelphia's turnover differential is, which is still negative, and I think about what the San Francisco 49ers defense has been doing lately, I can't envision a world where I don't have the 49ers defense inside of the top 12. 3 sacks per game, over an interception per game, 9.1 fantasy points per game. They had a bad stretch. They're back on track. And this is also an intuition call for me. In these tough matchups, I always have to make my own intuition call. I think the 49ers are going to win this game. I think they're pissed about what happened to them last year. They really didn't get a fair fight. They had to play quarterback with Christian McCaffrey. They've got Brock Purdy. They've got all their weapons. They've got their defense together. And I think their defense has a shockingly decent performance in week 13. And as I do at the end of every single week, I give you my favorite defense for you to pick up in preparation for next week. And this one's an easy choice too. It's the Texans defense taking on the New York Jets. Now the Texans defense, they're going to be widely available this week because of the fact that the Texans, well, their opponent this week, they're taking on the Denver Broncos, which it's not like the Denver scoring 30 plus, but they're playing good football right now. And Texans defense hasn't been that great in fantasy football. When you get an opportunity to take on the Jets offense, you got to take it. It's similar to the Carolina Panthers offense, maybe not quite as juicy, but it's still a great situation here. And Houston is going to be on a lot of waivers. Pick up the Texans defense before week 13. Stash them on your bench if you've got the roster space. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below and what questions you need answered for week 13 fantasy football. And if you want to see the top 30 wide receiver rankings for week 13 fantasy football, click on this video right here.